Greetings, Shelpers. We are at the brand new library with beautiful view to get started on our literary stream for probably the month or two. Today I'm going to be taking a look at contracts and how to spot a scam. They kind of overlap, and yet they kind of don't. So, the first thing I'm going to be doing is reading you the standard contract from the actual publisher who is publishing my first collection. Now, there are limits to this, including but not limited to, we are dealing with poetry. So it is going to look a lot different. Oh no, I just started. Hi, Lady Random, how are you? But no, it's going to look a lot different for poets in some ways than, say, novelists. Also, I am but one turtle. Please do your own research and, look for your own sources, but always make sure you vet your sources. I'm doing all right. I'm a little nervous as always doing these kind of things. So first things first, we are going to delve into the contract. So you got your book accepted and your editor's like, "Yas, girl, we want your stuff." And this is what your first page is going to look like. It's not much. It just said, this is a publishing agreement. It's entered to on this day and the date between, and it gives the party. So mine would be Toluca Germain Tertelli, herein known as the author, and Awesome Press, herein known as the publisher. Agreement. The author owns the copyright to the pieces in the following work. And yes, I have to have the copyright to all the pieces. Shell shelves, herein known as the work, and wishes to grant the publisher permission to reproduce and use the work in accordance with the terms stated herein. If the terms are not stated in the contract, they cannot do anything with it. For instance, as you will see, there is no mention of foreign language rights in this contract, meaning my publisher has no right to publish it, say, in Italian, French, and so on. It's only English. So we agree to the following. Now, in some of these pages, I will have some nice highlighting because I want you to pay attention to certain things. First thing out of the gate, the author retains all rights to the work. That's important, so I'm not giving away my entire copyright. And is free to submit any part of the work elsewhere for publication at any time. Okay, so there's something called reprints. And what reprints are I can take the individual poems in the collection and try to publish them in magazines and stuff even after the book is published. I just cannot, as you will see, go through and publish the entire book as it is with another publisher. At least not when they have the working rights to it. Okay, so however, the work in its entirety may not be reproduced by another publisher, except when a subsequent agreement has been reached between the publisher and author, or in the event of a reversion of rights. So they're telling me already that I have a reversion of rights clause coming. And you do not want to sign a contract that does not have a termination clause and a reversion of rights clause. You just do not. Because it can take you years to get out of a bad situation with a publisher. And if you get out of it, it doesn't mean they will give you the rights back to your work. I believe Dan Tansky, Monster Hunter, has been talking about how it took 10 years to get the rights back to his damn book. So make sure you have an in and out plan in case things go sour. You don't know if your publisher is going to end up being owned by someone else, going under, switching, anything like that. You don't know. So always make sure you get a reversion of rights and a termination clause. The author warrants that there has been no granting of interest in the copyright of the work by license or otherwise to any person or company or firm. That's because if I made an agreement, we can't enter into this one, because that agreement would supersede this one. The author further declares that if the work has been published, it remains the property of the author who has retained said copyright. Exactly. So what they're saying here is that if somebody else had it before them, that the rights all go back to me. Because there are some literary magazines that could take a poem or two of mine and literally not give back the copyright to my poems, and I could have signed them away for good. And then the magazine could say, well, the poem in the book, that one's still mine, and that could cause a shitload of issues. So I get the rights back. Okay. The author grants to the publisher the sole right to publish the work in English and offer it for sale. See, no foreign language rights. In the event of the publisher not exercising the option to publish further, the author has the full right to approach other publishers. So if they end up not publishing me or whatever, I can just go on my merry way. The publisher agrees to publish the work within 18 months of the signed contract, except in the event that the author agrees to extend the deadline to accommodate additional content related to the work, or in the event that the author cannot meet the deadline. So say I had a bunch of like different copyrighted material that I was still seeking permission to use, I might need more than that 18 months. And this is good for them because it means I have to get all my ducks in a row. And it's good for me because, well, I actually had one of my chapbooks with a publisher that sat on it for 3 fucking years and didn't publish it. This means they have to publish it or I can walk within that time frame, unless we both agree. Okay, so notwithstanding the warranties made by the author, full copyright remains at all times with the author. So it's just saying the warranties, meaning I'm telling them they can publish this X and Y way, but the rest of it I retain. The publisher agrees with the author to ensure that all copies of the work published by the publisher bear on the reverse of the title page for copies published in volume form, meaning physically, and on the packaging and in prominent places on screen or otherwise envisioned for the digital one. The symbol with the copyright, basically, accompanied by the name of the author and the year of the first publication of the work. The publisher will pay for and register a copyright of work within the first 3 months of publication if the author or publisher suspects legal concerns would be improved by copyright registration. Now, this is interesting because a lot of publishing houses, they go off and they totally and utterly copyright it immediately. And there is a difference between the copyright you get when you set down a thing on a fixed medium. Like I wrote a poem and I wrote it down on a piece of paper that has a copyright. I put music on a CD and that's a copyright, my own music, not someone else's. But what they're talking about when they say copyright is going down to the copyright office. And so many people are confused because they're like, why do you need to copyright something at the copyright office? I already have copyright because I'm the one who created it. And there is a huge, huge difference between the copyright you get as the creator and the copyright you get when you actually register it. And one of the big differences is that if you need to take someone to court for violating your copyright, you get way more money if you had registered it with the Copyright Office. You can only get so much money, and you can't go after like loss of income, for instance. Also, it's very hard to prove who wrote a certain book first at points. So let's say you have an unpublished novel and your neighbor like stole your idea. It's very rare. It does happen occasionally, but anyway, I digress. So if you went down to the Copyright Office for like the first 3 years or so, it would be considered, there's a certain Latin term for it. Don't ask me, but it would basically be ironclad proof because you had registered the damn thing that it's yours. So yes, you have copyright, but also it's very hard to prove in court. You can only go after so many damages. If you don't have the kind of copyright where you get it at the Copyright Office, you can actually not go after things like attorney fees when you're doing your settlement. So there are reasons to do this, but my publisher is very small. It's just a poetry book. The likelihood someone is going to steal all of my poems and make a mint off them is tiny, and I will explain that later because I have math for you for how much I'm going to be making off this contract if the boilerplate was what I would have stayed with, and it wasn't. So, alrighty. We move on with our lives. The publisher agrees with the author to ensure the author's name is included prominently on the front cover, jacket, spine, and title page of all volumes from copies of the work and on the packaging and on screen or otherwise envisioned on all electronic form versions of the work published by the publisher and in all publicity and advertisements of the work. So they can't just like put it really tiny and their logo or whatever really big. I have to have prominent placing, which is good because you want your work associated with your name. Because I don't like to talk about branding, but it's basically branding. All your covers are branding. Your name is your brand. I hope it is. I'm trying to inform, and later on we're going to be talking about scams. So, okay, the author agrees not to sue, claim, or take other actions against the publisher or its operators from any error or inconsistencies in the name, except for negligence in the event that the author has notified the publisher of errors or inaccuracies and the publisher has not corrected it to the best of their ability. So it's going to be very hard to claim that they're actually being purposefully negligent on this. So yeah, that would be difficult to prove. But most publishers, there would not be a good reason for them to be assholes that way. I'm not saying they wouldn't be, but yeah. Alrighty. Now we get to more fun stuff. Review copies. Hold on. I'm in the wrong spot, aren't I? Yes, I am. Okay. Here we go. Page 3. Sorry. I have my tablet, my notebook, my pages. Okay. So, warranty infringement. The author warrants that, to the best of the author's knowledge, the work contains no libelous or defamatory or other unlawful material and agrees to reimburse the publisher for any monies that the publisher has paid to a plaintiff against the work or its author in a court-ordered final judgment against the author, stating that the author breached the warranties containing the agreement for liability in respect of any intentionally libelous or defamatory or other unlawful material that may be contained in the work. So that means if I have to, let's say I wrote a hit piece on like all my ex-relatives, but I wrote it in vaguely veiled fiction. And they were like, wait a minute, I know that's me. I'm definitely Auntie Jane, or I'm definitely Uncle Reuben or something, and they can prove it. And I make them sound like awful people. Or I go after a celebrity and I start defaming them in a book, but my publisher thinks it's fake or something. They could get sued. And they're saying, hey, if I get sued and they win, I'm coming after you for the money. Because you're putting me in a spot. Which, yeah, I would definitely see that. Use of author's information. The publisher agrees not to voluntarily disclose any private, confidential, or personal info the author has provided without the author's prior and explicit consent. This is good because, like, okay, say for me, I'm disabled. And if I tell them, being on a book tour isn't good for my health, they can't just start going, oh, our author is sick. And it's because I'm disabled, but and they can't just start telling them other people private details. Like if you're averse to crowds, how your publisher can't go, oh yeah, they're averse to crowds because they're on the autism spectrum or some shit. So they have to actually keep your information private. So, unless you tell them you can share that kind of stuff. Editing of the manuscript. The publisher shall provide such treatment of the work that it is in a style and manner as deemed to the most suitable and appropriate to the sale and quality of the work, and the publisher shall make editorial changes of the work at its discretion. Okay, I'm going to stop there for just half a second, but it goes on. That means they're trying to make it as appealing as possible for sale. The publisher reserves the right to make any such editorial alterations, amendments, or deletions as may be necessary to correct grammar, syntax, spelling, and punctuation. Yes, God, please. I am so scared my book is going to have errors, but the publisher will seek final agreement in writing form from the author for all alterations. So they cannot change something in my book that I do not know about. And cover. So they cannot just give me a cover I fucking hate or is inappropriate. And trust me, that's happened. Recently, we had an article about a woman who wrote about, I think it was a writing book, but they actually, because it was called something like Naked Writing or something, and they actually had a naked woman in black and white on the cover with like the words covering all her goodie bits. And it made it seem like it was some kind of erotica novel instead of a writing book. So it was very, let's say, poorly done. And it made people think that the book was something completely different. Because if you're looking at a book and you think it's erotica, you're going to be like, okay, well, that's definitely not a writing book. So they're going to pass it by. And then people who want erotica are going to put it in their carts and be like, what the fuck is this writing advice? I don't write. I just wanted a good read or something. So it's good to know because most publishers actually don't give you, the author, a say on your cover. They just don't. Quoting of copyright material. If the author shall have incorporated in the work or any copyrighted material, whether it be text or illustrations, this shall be disclosed to the publisher. The publisher agrees to apply on behalf of the author, but at the author's expense, for written permission from copyright owners to republish such copyright material at the author's request. The publisher reserves the right to remove any such material the author does not have permission to include, and is not exempt from permissions under fair use guidelines. Okay, so if I start using song lyrics in all of my poems and they could get sued, they don't want to do that. So I either have to seek permission and it's going to cost me money, or I have to get rid of it in my book. Because kind of sort of going back to infringement, that's infringing on someone else's copyright. And you can't do that. So, yeah, fun. But you should know that by now. You know, if you're going to deal with someone else's stuff, you need explicit permission. And if it's from someone famous, it ain't going to come cheap. Okay, so physical specifications, printing, and binding runs. The publisher shall set out the work in clear modern type and shall have absolute discretion as to the format, typeface, style, binding, and printing of the work, and the number of copies to be printed and bound. Publisher will consult the author in book design. Like I said, you don't usually get that. And will make best efforts to accommodate any issues or concerns raised by the author. Now, I've already had the editor come to me and say, we're going to use this font. Is this a good font for you? Do you like it? And I never thought they would ask me about the cover, much less the font. So I was actually genuinely surprised because you usually don't get that. Okay. By the way, on the other page with the copyright, I did have the link so people can read more about copyright. It was on that page. I just didn't bring it up, but it's visible. Okay, so they are very collaborative, and I found that very, very cool. They are a small team, which comes with pluses and minuses, and I can talk about that a bit if any of you want. The pluses and minuses of going with a small publishing house. But on to page 4. Review copies. You're going to be like, well, why do we need review copies? Because some people, you know, the reviewers have to read the damn books before they can report on them. And they have to make it known how many, because A lot of places might be like, well, we want physical copies. And if my publisher is like, well, we can only give out 3, which places do you want to send a physical copy to? So it kind of gets a little wonky in regards to professional reviewers, and reviews do help you at least get the book in front of more people. So they are a good idea. So the publisher reserves the right to distribute copies of the work to book reviewers of print media, newspapers, magazines, journals, or to the media of radio and television for the purposes of review, criticism, and promotion. All matters concerning review copies in respect of the work shall be at the discretion of the publisher. So basically they're saying, if we have a specific, few places we like to send to for reviews, I'm not going to get a say in where they send those particular copies. Because they have, as a publisher, they should have at least a few avenues for getting work out there in front of people. All matters concerning review copies in respect of the work, for respect of the publisher, publisher agrees to submit up to 3 print copies to reviewers, as well as digital copies to any reviewers who request them. So they only send out physical, just a few copies. And the reason is because it costs a lot of money to keep shipping out books. Postage really adds up, copies really add up. And a lot of times when you give someone a physical copy, it's not guaranteed they're going to actually review the damn book. So if my publisher decided to send out, let's say, 80 copies, and we only got 20 reviews, that's 60 fucking copies wasted. But since it's also going to be in digital form, they will be more open to sending out to people who want a digital thing, because all you got to do is email somebody. It costs nothing. So the publisher agrees to provide review copies for any journals and newspapers that may require physical copies the author wishes to receive a review from. So maybe they'll cover that as well, but I can send review copies from my own inventory, which means at my own expense. And I would bet you in the last line, if it gets too out of hand, my publisher would just say, hey, we actually sent out a few more copies because of who you wanted to review you, but we've run out of money, or we don't want to put any more money into this, so you can send them out. Sometimes review places will not review your damn book if the author sends it, but will at least consider it if the publisher themselves does it. And we're going to be talking about that again, not with reviewers, but contests. Because there are contests that require publishers send in the book. So if I want my book at a specific contest for published books, I might have to go through my publisher to do that. But it doesn't talk about that specifically in here. But it was one of the red flags I had to ask my publisher about. So, author's complimentary copies. The publisher will provide with 2 copies of the work completely free of charge. This is a standard as far as you may get some copies. Some authors get none. Some authors get more. This is not what I argued for. I got more. The author's right to purchase copies. If the author should elect to purchase copies of the work in addition to the complimentary copies supplied in accordance with Clause 10 Supra of the agreement, then the author shall be entitled to purchase additional copies at a discount of a minimum of 40%. It is agreed between the parties that copies of the work sold in the manner to the author shall not qualify for royalty payments. However, any proceeds from the books purchased and resold by the author will be retained solely by the author. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Okay, page 4. I have notes. Okay. So, I could argue maybe in contract for a higher percentage off of that. But one of the reasons they're not able to give me royalties for it is one, I'm already getting such a supreme discount. So let's say my book costs $10. Let's just say, because it's easy for me. That means the book would cost me $6. But then they would have to pay me royalties. And let's say royalties is like $1 for me. Then they'd only be making $5. Let's say it costs like $4.50 to print a copy, just to say. It would only leave them 50 cents. I'm just throwing out numbers out of my asshole right now. But you see where I'm going with this. And also, they actually want people to buy the books from them because they would get more of an investment back, or more back for their investment than if I were to purchase all the books. But it's good to have a discount because when you're doing readings or signings, you need a supply of books on hand. Most people who go to a book signing do not necessarily have the book already bought. I know you see a lot of movies where like people are in line and they're holding their books to their chest and they're like, oh my God, can you please sign this? But a lot of people, if it's not a very famous author, don't already have your book in front of them. So if you're at a local reading or something and you read and then somebody's like, oh my God, that story or whatever made me laugh and I really want this book. Well, what are you going to do when you don't have the book on hand? If you're doing it at a bookstore, they might have a couple copies in the back of your book, but that's the thing. Bookstores can't carry every book. So the likelihood that just some random ass, like, okay, if I went into Barnes and Noble in a town like an hour away, it's very, very unlikely they would have copies of my stupid poetry book on hand. They can, and my publisher is going to make sure they're available for purchase through Barnes and Noble and shit. But just because something is available to purchase through Barnes and Noble does not mean that they will have it on the shelves. It means if someone walks into Barnes and Noble and says, I would love to Luca's new book, they're like, okay, give us the number and we can order it for you. There's a huge difference. So you always need a stack of books on hand when you're going to do events. So it's good to have that discount. Alrighty. And also, we have a local bookstore in town, because I'm going back to the last thing, the resold by the author. I have a local bookstore in town, which we haven't for many years. The local bookstore owner, he told me that they would take a couple copies to sell. I'm assuming it's on some kind of consignment. So that means if I buy books and give them and the bookstore person sells them, then I can keep all the money. My publisher doesn't come back to me and say, hey, you stocked them with your own personal books that you bought from us, but you need to give us a cut. That's not going to happen here. Okay, promotion and marketing. The publisher shall decide the retail price of the work and may, at their discretion, adjust the retail price to facilitate promotion and marketing. So they're telling me they are the ones that decide if there's a sale going on, not me. Some writers will not like this. The publisher agrees to promote the sale of the work by any means at its disposal. Okay, we're going to stop here. I wrote on the bottom vaguely worded. Yeah, it is. You don't know if the publisher has just like a Twitter account and they're going to tweet out that your book is dropped and then do nothing else. You don't really know if the publisher has like a team of like reviewers waiting in the wings, if they have a YouTube channel with like, let's say 10,000 followers. You don't know what any means at its disposal could mean. And one of the things with a small press is usually they have less means than a big publishing house because, smaller team, smaller money, everything like that. But here's the thing, at a big publishing house, let's say I'm a novelist, because big publishing houses, unless you're like one of the star, like Rupi Kaur or whatever, Instagram poets, they don't really touch poetry. But let's say I'm a novelist. If I'm just a beginning rinky-dink novelist, they only gave a $10,000 advance. I'm not going to get that star power behind me. They're not sending me on book tours. They're not giving me like all this press, stuff like that. So while they have the means at big publishing houses, unless they spent a lot of money on my advance or I'm a huge fucking star, they're not going to pay attention to me. Whereas a small publishing house might not have access to all that money or all those avenues to get my book out there and get the word out. They might also promote me harder because they are such a small team that any project they take on, they have to love and support the ever-living fuck out of. So big publishing houses can drop you and just focus their main promotion efforts on big people. But small publishing houses don't have all that to begin with. So either way, as an author, you're doing the lion's share of marketing and promotion. So I don't look at it as, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. I look at it as I have to do X, Y, and Z. As far as I can push it, I should. Because you always have to assume they're going to do nothing. Now, I actually spoke to my publisher about this, and they gave me a very long email back as to what they have available to do. And that was helpful. That was helpful to know where they stand. So, the publisher agrees to notify relevant areas of the trade of the impending release of the work. The extent of the process is at the discretion of the publisher. So they can tell Barnes & Noble and stuff that I have a new book out, basically, if they want to. The author agrees to grant the publisher permission to use content, including graphics and text associated with the work, as promotional material, right? You have to get, say there's going to be a blurb or maybe a sample poem or something like that. They have to use parts of the work to get people interested. Say I did the cover myself, which of course I'm not going to do. You've seen my work. But say I did the cover and everything and I'm like, no, you can't use my name. You can't use anything. Well, then how are they going to promote it? Say there's a book on sale and you can't see anything about it. You can't look inside or anything. You're not going to want it. So the publisher agrees to forward any media requests directly to the author within 2 business days of receiving them. Because sometimes when somebody wants to interview you, they will actually go back to your publisher and not you. Or sometimes your agent and not you. But I don't have an agent, so. Alrighty. We are going to pop off to the next page, hopefully. I hope I did that correctly. Hold on, everybody. Let's hope I don't click something that goes to hell. Okay, there we go. Feel like I'm defusing a bomb each time. Okay, now we talk about money. The thing everybody wants to know about when you're getting all this stuff going on. Royalties. The publisher, for its part, agrees to pay to the author royalties as follows. Subject to the terms and conditions set out in the agreement, the publisher shall pay to the author the following payments in respect of the work sold. Home and export sales, which means physical books. A 50% of the net sales price. Ebook sales, a royalty of 75% of the net sales price. Okay, first of all, those sound extremely high. And they actually are pretty damn high for most fucking publishers, even the bigger ones. Okay, but we're going to walk this back. And I have up here, the word net is important. How does the press calculate net? Because even though net is a standard term, what is taken out as net is different. Some places will say, well, net is the cost of printing the book, and that's usually, yes, all of the presses. Some people will say, well, the editor needs this, or, the shipping and everything of the book has to come out of the net, quote unquote. So there are a lot of complicated calculations when it comes to net, and publishers will have different answers to how much is left over. So that being said, I had a discussion with my publisher about net. And I'm not saying what they all subtract or anything. What I got back from my publisher said this, and I'm trying to be very transparent about money. And this is not the royalty split I got, because I had to argue for different numbers for different reasons. But I'm just going to say, based on the boilerplate standard, we're going to do some math. Are you ready, kids? Strap on in. The math is the fun part. Okay, my publisher told me that they try to give $1 or $2 per book as payment. Okay, so imagine, usually it's closer to $1 because net is a beast. Okay, so but let's find out. This is comparable, if not better, than other publishers, but you have to remember, poetry books on average sell 300 copies in 5 years. So let's do that math for just a second. That means I would be getting, let's take the $2 a book, even though that's not going to be it. Let's say I get $2 a book. 300 copies is the average. Let's say I'm average all the way around. And when they say average, they mean people who, sold higher, but they also mean people who sold lower. So maybe Toluca's book will sell 20 copies, maybe 100 copies. We don't know. The market is interesting, and poetry is very niche. So we don't know just how many I'm going to sell. But let's say I'm average. Let's say, even on the high end, that's $600 I would be receiving in 5 years. That's $120 per year from my book I would be getting if this were my royalty split. $120 a year. Now, I could go back and tell you all of the hours I've worked on this, how many years I've worked on this thing to see it come to life, to get $120 a year. Yeah, I'm not getting rich. I am definitely not getting rich. If you sell 1,000 copies, beyond 1,000, that is mythical unicorn territory for a poetry collection. Most people don't get that, especially living people, except a few of the IG darlings, the Instagram people. It's how it works. It's just how it works. I know it doesn't sound fair. Here's the thing. Even novelists who tend to have better luck, I'm going to break down someday. Like, okay, when they had this big thing where Penguin Random House was going to merge with another one of the big 5 publishing companies, and like Hatchet and everything was going to stop it, they actually said a few very interesting things in that courtroom, including what percentage of books sell how many copies, and that they're basically throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. And the numbers they gave would dishearten anyone, because what they're talking about is like trade books, which means for a wide variety of audiences. And it was very, let's say, illuminating. It has been speculated that more and more writing is going to become a profession only the rich can do, because you cannot support yourself on this. I know people who have had like 4 or 5 novels published that cannot support themselves full time. Okay, we're going to go off on a tangent. I shouldn't be doing this. But money. Okay, so if you'll notice on here, I'm not getting what's called an advance. Most people who work with really small publishing companies like this one, and they're doing something like poetry, we don't get an advance. But you've heard of the novelists who get like, let's say $100,000 advance for their book or whatever. Okay, we're going to break that down just a tiny bit. If you got a big advance, that means you have an agent. So that means your agent gets 15% standard. If your agent asks for more than that, you run. We're going to talk about that later. So 15% standard, that means 15% right away goes to your agent. So that's $15,000. And you're like, I still have $85,000. Okay, but you're paying taxes on that $85,000. And when you get in advance as a novelist, you don't get it as a lump sum. You get it broken up into 3 payments. Usually it's 3. Now they're arguing into 4. So the first one is on acceptance of the contract. Then the second one is when you turn in the book, like the finished book with all the edits they want. And then the third one is when the book finally hits shelves. So you're now $85,000 in 3 different payments, and that could be years apart. So you might get like 20-some thousand now or whatever, and then another 20-some thousand 2 years from now. And then a year after that, you'll get another 20-some thousand. And yeah, that's a lot of money to some people. But if you break down the fact that the book took you like 5 years to write, and then like 3 years to wait on being published, you're waiting on an $85,000 payday for like 8 years. That's like $10,000 a year. The math just, it's not great. And when you make, that's 6 figures. And that 6 figures isn't something everybody gets. Everybody talks about the $1 million advance or whatever. Those are a very, very small amount of writers. Very small. So people don't realize that your agent gets a cut each time. People don't realize that they cut it up into different parts when you get an advance, and that could cover a number of years. So you're not able to just get that one lump sum right away. It's very convoluted, and a lot of people don't know. And that's why they say like writing is becoming more and more for the elite, or for people who have family members who can support them while they write. Because this stuff does not pay your bills. Unless you become Stephen King, Terry Pratchett, Tenerife Dew, etc., etc., etc. So, yeah, that's money. That's my money for my contract. I'm going to be getting probably $300 in 5 years. That would be the average. Maybe I'll get 6, but still, that would only average out to about $120 a year. That isn't enough to live on. That's another reason why they tell you as a poet, don't write for a living. You're supposed to do things like teach. And that's why most MFAs for poets focus on the teaching aspect. All right, onward we go. Sorry to put a little sandpaper in your dreams there. The net sales price shall be defined as the price set out by the distributor as payment in respect to the work. Okay, so they do kind of tell you what net is here. So, as payment in respect to the work. So, it's still pretty vague. The publisher agrees to provide the author with a statement for each royalty period directly from the distributor as proof of net sales. Sometimes people will not give you a breakdown. So I'm glad they're going to give you a breakdown. This sounds like transparency, which a fair amount of publishing companies actually don't do. So the author has the right to approach and stock their books in bookshops offline and will keep full commission. We've talked about that. Publication of an ebook version. The publisher shall publish an ebook edition of the book following the publication of the paperback. So paperback comes first. There is no hardcover edition because for poetry especially, it does not make sense. Compliance by author and publisher. The publisher shall perform all the terms and conditions set out in the agreement, but shall not be held in default of any provisions of the agreement if the author shall not have fully complied. So they're not held responsible if I don't do my part. with the terms and conditions. Failure by the publisher to comply with the conditions of the agreement shall be deemed a breach of said agreement only if the author has notified the publisher of alleged fault in writing by certified mail, and only if the publisher has failed to rectify the alleged fault within 60 days of said written and registered notification. Well, hello, Opal. Hello. I'll just call you Hex if that's all right. How are you doing today? We're doing boring contract shit. Okay, so I actually have to do it by certified mail. Hi, Dal. How are you doing? In case the publisher is going into liquidation or otherwise ceasing to trade, or the work going out of print, rights shall revert to the author. This is hinting at a termination and right of reversion. That's what you want. Because you don't want everybody to sit... Okay, Hexa is good. Okay, thank you. You don't want your stuff to sit forever in limbo, because it does that. Okay, so all remaining stock will be discounted to the trade or offered to the author at a lower price of the same discount or the publisher's actual printing cost. I would actually like to know my publisher's actual printing cost. Yeah, they actually are changing their agreements to fuck us over. That is true. So I'm showing you what a writing contract looks like and what I find bad and good about it. If the author declines the offer or makes a partial purchase of remaining inventory, remaining copies may be pulped. In the event of the circumstances or any combination, outstanding royalties shall be calculated up and included in the said date and paid to the author. Okay, so they're saying if they go under, if they still owe me royalties, they're going to give them to me still. Infringement of copyright. If there shall be infringement of the copyright of the work by any other party or any rights in the work, the publisher shall notify the author in writing. So say somebody steals my poems, which, yeah, they will never do. My publisher, if they find out, will have to let me know. And then we have to figure out what we need to do. I'm assuming all it will take is my publisher giving a cease and desist letter from their lawyer, but I digress. Okay, reversion of rights. This is the shit you want to see right here. Okay, I say up top, don't sign a contract without a clear reversion clause. You don't want your stuff held up for years. You don't... trust me on that one. I've had so many writers kicking themselves over not getting a reversion rights. If they don't have one and you can't tell them, we're going to do right of reversion, don't sign it. Do not sign this. You need something clear that gives you a getaway. Because if they can keep your rights, they will. If they don't have to give you back anything, they won't. So, always get a termination clause. Always get a damn reversion clause. Take it from me, I've seen too many writers so upset that they never get their books back. And I mean never. Okay, out of print. If after the expiration of 2 years, and 2 years is a short window, I say that on the side it is. Usually it's around 5, but that's just in case they want out earlier or I do. From the date of publisher's first publication of the work is deemed out of print as defined below. Through ordinary retail channels, author may, by written notice to publisher, request publisher to reissue the work or license rights in the work. So I can say, hey, I don't think this is over. Why don't you give it a couple more years? And my publisher can be like, yeah, okay, it did fairly well. But I talked to my publisher about how often they get rid of the work because of what's written further along. Publisher shall notify author in writing within 30 days after the publisher's receipt of a demand whether it intends to comply. If the work is out of print and the publisher does not respond, or if within 6 months following the issuance of notice that it intends to comply, publisher has not complied by reissuing the work or entering into a license for a new edition, then the agreement shall terminate all rights. So if I don't hear back from them in like 6 months, whether they're going to do anything with it, that just means I get my rights back and they can go on their merry little way. Okay, hereunder shall automatically revert to the author. So 6 months, no contact for whether they want to renew my book means I get it back. I'm very grateful they actually say that. For 30 days following termination of the agreement pursuant to Section 10, authors shall have the right to purchase available production materials, if any, at cost or less, as determined by the publisher. The work shall be considered out of print if, and this is an interesting section, publisher is not offering copies of the work for sale in the U.S. in a full-length English edition, and there is no existing agreement between publisher and a licensed publisher requiring publication of a full-length English language edition within the U.S. in the next 12 months. Okay, why I'm glad they have this in here, and I wrote it on the side. Copies for sale can be tricky, because I have somebody in, not my life, but I talk to her a lot, and she had problems with 2 different publishers not giving her the rights to her book back because her book was still on sale from a second party Amazon seller who jacked up the price like $500 a book. And they're like, well, the books are still on sale somewhere, so technically we don't have to give you your rights back. Even though they didn't have the book in their stock in the publishing house, they weren't putting it on shelves in any of the stores themselves, and somebody was selling their book at an exorbitant price. Yes, exactly, it's bullshit. So when they say it's not available, also when they say if it's still available, you really want to know what that means, because they can use somebody as a reseller as a loophole to not give you back your shit. So my publisher says, basically, for sale by them. So it has to be from them in order to still count. So that's good. Even though my book will be available on Amazon, and you can order it from Barnes & Noble, and they're actually going to put like a for sale thing in Target, but I don't think Target's going to stock my damn book, to be honest with you. But anyway, they're going to, if it's not from them, it's not going to count. So that's good. Audiobook rights. Here's a thing that was not mentioned until now. Because before I mentioned physical book and ebook. If publisher has not published an audiobook of the work or executed a license or commenced production of the work in audiobook format within 1 year of the initial publication of the work, publishers shall, upon written notice from author, revert such rights to the work. So let's say they sat on it for a year after my book was first published, and they decided not to do anything with it. I could go and get the audiobook done somewhere else myself. I could get another contract from another press to do my audiobook, or, as I said before, my foreign language rights. I don't have to worry about TV and film rights because it's a poetry book, but they don't have access to that either. So, like, all these different formats, the physical, the audiobook, ebook, are called subsidiary rights. So basically, even as a book, it's an intellectual property. It's your IP. And what you're doing is you're licensing out different facets of your IP when you do different formats or whatever. So that's a different way to look at it, if that helps you at all. Okay, picking up my tablet again. Whoops. I tilted it over. 1 second. Okay. Assignment of contract. It is mutually agreed. I hope I didn't mute myself. There we go. It is mutually agreed between the parties in this agreement for themselves and for respective executioners and administrators or successors in business, as the case or context may apply, that the author has willingly written the work, and any assignee shall be bound by all the terms and conditions. Yeah, I did it myself. For better or worse, this is my issue. Okay, so this is interesting. Got a lot of notes here. Thank you, Lady Random. Discontinuance of publication. The publisher shall notify the author in writing when the work no longer warrants continued publication. Such notification and decision shall be entirely at the discretion of the publisher. I was like, whoa, okay, time out here, because that is a red flag because imagine like they publish me and like 3 months later, for no reason at all, they decide to drop me. Now, that would not be something most publishers would do because they spent money on a cover and formatting and all that other bullshit. But can you imagine waiting years to see your book in print and then like 3 months later, your publisher going, nope, not going to do it anymore. So I actually asked for clarification why they would get rid of their books. If they've done it before, what this has to do with anything. So, yeah, I actually asked them, like, under what circumstances would you get rid of me? Like, I don't want my book gone that fast. So, I had a back and forth with the publisher a little bit. So, payment of accounts. The rest of it just talks about how the remainder can be sold back to me like before. So, payment of accounts. The publisher shall render accounts of said work biannually or at the 31st of December and 30th of June, so I would get paid every 6 months. And the first year and thereafter, and all monies due to the author shall be paid to the account within 12 weeks. Okay, see, we're going to stop right there. 12 weeks is 3 more months. So imagine they're like, well, you get paid on the 30th of June, except it's going to take who's ever doing our finances about 12 more weeks to get it done. So imagine I have a couple $100 sitting there, which we've already talked about how much money I'm actually going to be making. And if I followed this contract. So let's say I'm waiting on a paycheck in June and it doesn't arrive until September. That is something completely plausible here. So, you have to wait. I've set accountancy date. If the publisher has failed to pay the money by the date, the author shall, in written and registered, there again, registered mail, inform the publisher that I didn't get it. So what this tells me is they outsource their financing to someone else. That's why there would be more delays. Which, since it's not in their publishing house exactly, can cause more problems beyond delays. Unless they have someone they can absolutely trust to do the finances. Okay, I'm going to take a second because I'm going to get a quick drink here. Because I've been talking almost a stupid hour nonstop. I hope this is informative. I really do. Thank you, my dear. Nice ice water. Okay, so governing law and jurisdiction. Any difference arising between the author and publisher touching on this agreement or the rights and liabilities contained therein shall be governed by and interpreted in all respects in accordance with the law of the United States, excluding conflict of law principles that would cause the application of law in another jurisdiction. So, since my publisher and I are both in the United States, the interesting thing about this is they don't mention things happening in their state. So if I have to sue my publisher for any reason, I could argue that they have to go to court in Wisconsin because they don't list their state on here. And since they don't, that would give me leeway to argue it. Okay, so let's go with complete contract. It is acknowledged by the publisher that it shall attempt to fulfill any and all obligations under the terms of this agreement, and it is acknowledged by the author that the publisher has not made any prior promises, pledges, or guarantees except may be contained in this agreement. So, let's back that up here. Let's say my publisher told me something in email. Like, we argued, because we did argue new terms for print copies and everything, just because they told me that in email doesn't mean they have to honor it, because it's not in the contract I signed. You could argue it, but by me signing this, before I signed this, if it wasn't in there, they don't necessarily have to abide by it. Because usually with a contract, you have to amend it or get a different contract. So if you talk to something that's about something that's bothering you in your contract, and your publisher's like, no, honey, it's fine. Just sign it. This is what it actually means. No. If it doesn't fucking say that, put it in here. Because you want that covered. Because this says right here, anything that's not in here, this covers what's in here. And anything not in here, it's not covered. So, like, your publisher can tell you anything they want to. And so that's why when you agree with the contract, you have to actually have them change it. So if there's something that's really bothering you, you don't sign it unless you get it in the contract itself. Say, I would feel more comfortable if like this were in here or this were out of here and this is why. They can refuse, but I keep telling people this and I mean it. When you're doing contracts, you are arguing for what you want and trying to make it equitable for both parties. You have power here. Writers get so gaga over, oh my God, it's finally happening. Oh my God, I finally have a contract. One of the first things I did with this, after I cried because, you know, getting an acceptance finally after all these years for my book, I sobbed. I'll admit it. There was a lot of complicated feelings. But one of the first things I did after I read it carefully is I asked a friend who had more experience in writing contracts. I said, okay, I'm worried about this. Should I be? Are you seeing anything I'm not seeing? And they wrote me back and said, well, here, this and that would be red flags. This would be a pink flag, etc. Not this exact contract. It was before they revamped their contract. This is their boilerplate now. They gave me the old one. I got this one, and then I argued for a different one. But it was good to have somebody else's opinion who had more knowledge of contracts than I do. And that's the thing. I have to tell you again, I am not a professional. I am not a lawyer. I've just been around the publishing thing for a while. So there will be times where I might fuck up something, or somebody else will see something really damaging in here that I don't see, which is why you always have to deal with professionals doing all of this. Okay, so, which constitutes a complete contract in the whole and complete understanding of the parties, and no representatives other than those expressly contained herein shall be binding, and that this agreement is entered into in good faith by both parties, it being directly understood that neither party has guaranteed, nor intends, or is able to guarantee, nor is able to predict the exact sale of a specific number of copies of the work. Now, I always say now to preface, but yeah, your publisher cannot and should never guarantee you how many copies will be sold. If your publishing company starts telling you, oh, we can sell hundreds of thousands of copies, millions of copies, you're going to be like the next whatever the fuck. No, they never can make you a guarantee. Not once, not ever. And if they start blowing that kind of smoke up your rectum, especially if you're a first-time author. Now, if you're, oh God, I need somebody who's not like horribly racist or anything. If you're Neil Gaiman, and based on your other books, you do this number, they can say, well, I can comfortably think that we might get to this number based on your other sales. That might be a different story, but nobody can guarantee you a number of copies sold. They cannot guarantee you any of that. And if you have a publisher who's promising you the moon, they are going to be scamming you horribly. We will get to that later. Both the author and the publisher acknowledge that they have relied upon their own inspection, investigation, and judgment entering into this agreement. The publisher and author further warrant that they have the right and power to enter into the agreement. So if I wasn't able to consent for whatever reason, like I was a minor. Okay, page 8. This is the last one. And then we move on to the scam stuff. Cancellation. The author retains the right to cancel this agreement within 14 days or during the first draft of the work. Okay? so I can exit it early. And I'm like, only early? But hold on. The time period begins on the day after the contract is signed by the author, which would be past now because it was the 17th of May. To exercise the right to cancel, the author must inform the publisher in writing by email or certified mail. I don't have to do and certified mail on this one. In the event that the publisher has received monies from the author. I was like, whoa, that's a bad one. Flag on the play here. I actually said to my publisher, under what circumstances would I be giving you money? Because for traditional publishing, they are not supposed to ask you for money at all. Not once, not ever. There is something called hybrid publishing out there where you do foot a lot of the money like you would in indie publishing. And there are very few reasons I would personally tell you to go for hybrid, but I'm like, okay, you're a traditional publisher. Why would this line be in my contract? So I asked for clarification. Why would I be giving you money if you are a traditional publisher? Because the contract doesn't say I have to give them any money anywhere. I looked, we've read it, it's fine. This is the whole contract outside of the signature page. And I'm like, okay, so under what circumstance would I be giving you money? And my publisher said, well, in case of like the copyrighted thing we talked about earlier in the contract, where they would try to get the rights for me, but I'd have to pony up the dough. Or this is where the contests come in. There are certain contests for published books that I might want my publisher to submit to, but they have to do it on my behalf because authors can't always send in those books. It has to come directly from your publisher. So say I want my publisher to enter in like the Amazing Shell Literary Award, and they need to do it. And the Shell Literary Award, just to enter it costs $20 damn. I would have to give my publisher that money in order to enter that contest. Because my publisher isn't going to enter every contest with a fee on my behalf out of their own pocket. That would just be ridiculous. So that's why. But if they wouldn't have had a very good answer for that, I would have ran away. And if they ask me for money now, I'm going to run. Because there is nothing in my contract that says I have to pay them any money. So if they ask me for any money, that's outside of the contract. So if you have a traditional publisher, and I'm going to harp on this forever, traditional publishers do not ask you for money. They do not. They never will. So that was why that scared me. I was like, oh shit, buried on the last fucking page. But no, that's not why. Okay, the author agrees to forfeit any amount invested in the work. Okay, so that means if the publisher, my publisher is a woman, if she sent out anything on my behalf, led to a contest, I wouldn't be getting the contest fees back. She would have paid them already. That makes sense. But like I said, if she tells me 3 months down the road, oh yeah, Toluca, we need about $300, I'm going to be like, bye. You're supposed to be selling my book to get that money, not asking me. So anyway, the publisher agrees to revert the rights of the work to the author at any time after the first royalty period has been paid with an request in email or written correspondence. So they are basically telling me after the first 6 to 9 months, I can pull the plug on this if I want to. Okay, so that is good. So let's say they do fuck all with my work. The typeface, everything is sloppy. The cover is fucking terrible. And they somehow got me to okay it anyway. And they do nothing but sit on my book. I can just be like, okay, you don't like my book, obviously, or I have somewhere better I can take it. Give me the book back. However, the publisher will still own my cover, or whoever did the cover for me. And in this, at this point, it's going to be my publisher, because it's one of the things she used to do is make covers for people. So she will own my cover, and I'll need a new ISBN. Let's talk for a minute about ISBNs, shall we? I put a nice little, oh shit, sorry everybody, hold on. I unclicked it because I'm special like that. Okay. An ISBN, checks notes, stands for an International Standard Book Number. It is something, I think it's 16 digits. It is something that all books have if you want to put them for sale. If you do not have an ISBN, you cannot put them for sale. It is how bookstores buy your book for people or to stock it. It is how libraries get it. You need an ISBN. And usually publishers purchase in bulk, so it costs them about $10 per. If I were to do it for an individual, I think it costs like $200, $250, somewhere in there. And also, your number is specifically tied to your publisher. So if I broke ranks with my publisher and left, I would definitely need a new ISBN and a new cover. So that is something to keep in mind if you end up doing that. But if your publisher is treating your work poorly, trust me when I say it could be a lot worse buying a new ISBN and getting a new cover and getting your book back than it can be to let someone who doesn't like your work, who you can't trust, have your book for basically eternity or as long as they want to. So, yeah. That's the contract. I argued for different royalties. I argued for different amounts of copies. I asked for clarification or modifications to a few of those little red flags, because I don't think she exactly understood, like, at first what that looked like to me, and I was like, holy shit. One of the things the old boilerplate did that, or didn't do, that the new boilerplate did, was talk about how I could leave, how I could terminate the contract, what more clearly that I would get my rights back right away. So that was a much better contract, but also still had a few things where I was like, oh, girl, like, what are you doing to me? But I do feel much better after, like, hashing it out in a long-ass email thread and fixing things on the contract itself. Like I said, if they promise you something, it better be in this fucking piece of paper. So, we've done the contract. Does anybody have any questions? Did I make it clear? I hope so. Like I said, always run if there is no reversion. Always run if a traditional publisher asks you for money. Just, things to think about. So now we're going to take a slight detour and talk about more red flags of different kinds. Okay, so this is about how to spot a red flag in a writing contest. Okay? Because somebody asked, now I need to do some more caveats. Again, not a professional, I'm not an attorney, this is just what I know. I could be making a mistake, I could have missed something. But this is to get you started. Because somebody asked, I think it was Hasno on Dan's stream, the night I was on, like almost 2 weeks ago, how you spot a legitimate writing contest or how you spot a legitimate publisher. And I think what we need to do is talk about red flags. So, red flag number 1. And I have more notes I have to flip to without touching the mouse. So, bear with me for just 1 second, Shelpers. Because this part of my notes is all over the fucking place. But I'll probably just go off on tangents anyway. 1. The contest takes all rights to all entries. I've talked about this a lot, but if you ever have a contest that literally takes your copyright or all rights from you, the minute you submit it to them, I don't like it when they take all rights to the winners either. But the second you click that send button, they do not let you take it back, and they take all rights so they can do whatever the fuck they want to your entry. They can change the protagonist out. They can put it in a book and sell it for how much ever they want to without giving you a dime, because it's theirs now. Exactly. We had let's say an issue with one of the, let me just say, how do I put this? One of the VTuber organizations that was doing a contest for a costume design. And one of the things they said in their costume design guidelines was, whatever the fuck our company is, we take all rights to all entries. And they had the right to do whatever they wanted with those entries. So, say one person won, and at the time they weren't even giving a cash prize, they could still take like 12, 18, 100 other people, remix their designs, and give them to the models to use. They could have said, oh, well, this one's worth saying first prize, but the second prize winner would look good on this model. And all of a sudden, they have a fountain of creative work that they can remix, reuse, do whatever the fuck they want with it. They don't even have to tell you who the artist was, because they took it. They actually took it all. And people were so desperate, right? I mean, that's the thing. They would take it all. And at the time, there was no prize. At the time, there wasn't. Now, one of their talents stepped up and was going to give the money to the winner out of their own pocket. But the company itself was not. They were not going to even give a prize to the winner. But yet they were taking everybody's rights. Never let them take your rights, especially for no money. I can't believe that people are so desperate for a credit and like, oh, what will it do for my career? And it's like, honey, no. Most people, they're not even going to remember your name. They can take your shit. So, same thing with writing contests. I'm going to call out one. I think it was the Oprah magazine that did this to writers at one point for an essay contest. And I was like, no, fucking no. Okay, so number 2 is high fees. Now, entry fees themselves, yeah, that's the thing. And the thing is, people always respond with, you die from exposure. So, entry fees themselves are not a red flag, but high entry fees. So let's say I'm going to enter a book contest. Book contests, normally it's like $25 a pop to enter a book contest. I'm not joking. I wish I were. But let's say there's a book contest and all of a sudden it's like, submit your book, $60 per entry. That's way higher than industry standard. That is a red flag. Now, personally, I don't pay to enter jack shit. I can't afford it. I understand why some people do it. Someday, I already have why I don't pay submission fees, but someday I'm actually going to do a video or something on how much an average novelist makes, because I already did that with my poetry, and then I'm going to talk about how much like the top tier magazines pull in or contests pull in a year, and why they say they need to charge it, though I kind of did it in my other one. But I want to show you the reality, because there's a lot of money flying around out there in the writing universe. And there was just an article by one of the co-owners of a place called Shellf, which I highly recommend, who was just talking about this today in Lit Mag News, I think that's what it's called now, that there is a lot of money in writing. It just doesn't go to the damn writers. It goes to the programs and the people who are running the contests and shit. Or some of the higher tier magazines. It doesn't go back to us, but people make a damn good amount of money off of us. So So dozens of contests per year and dozens of categories per contest. If they're always literally running contests and wanting to pull more people in, where it seems like it's literally a revolving door. Like they don't have just like 4 contests or whatever, but it's literally contests all the time. And like there's like 18 different categories for all different kinds of poems. You have something wrong here. They have different categories in most legit contests, yes. But if it's a laundry list, red flag. Okay, number 4, everybody wins. If everybody wins something, then everybody technically is a loser because they're trying to draw you in. If they can guarantee you the win, they're trying to draw you in. And why are they trying to draw you in? Probably to take your money. I have a lot of experience with this because when I was in my teens, I fell for probably every fucking scam in the book. I'm serious. There was something called Poetry.com back in the day. And it's defunct now, supposedly, though they tried to bring it back. And what it was it would advertise on every back of the writer magazine. So writer magazines usually have like anthology calls and all kinds of classifieds. Well, they tell you flat out they don't vet those. But since I saw it in a writer magazine and I was a teenager, like 14, my brain was like, oh, this is legitimate. So I sent to Poetry.com. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Poetry.com. 1 second. But they would make sure everybody won. Their books were anthologies that were overpriced. The font in the books was like 3-point font. And there were like multiple poems to a page. And there were like hundreds of pages to a book. So they could cram everybody in there. Because if let's say the book was $50. And let's say they managed to get like 500 poets into one damn book. That's like almost everybody wants a book, right? And here's the thing. When you're a winner of a contest, generally you get a copy of the anthology, the magazine, or whatever for free. So if you win, quote unquote, and they're like, would you like to buy the anthology you're in? Only $50. That's a red flag. Because as a winner, you're supposed to get a complimentary copy almost all the fucking time. So, that ties into this one. Books with the winners cost a mint, that $50 book. There's no reason it should, yes, definitely scam alert. There's no reason a book should cost $50, especially not an anthology with a bunch of winners most people have never heard of. Okay? Next one. Yeah, I fell for Poetry.com a lot. I fell for, so many times. And I thought I was good. And then when I found out they were a scam, I thought they were bad. And I gotta tell you, Poetry.com was the master because they bombarded you once you sent something in. And they offered you mugs and t-shirts with your poetry on them. Yeah, I'll go into it. It's a whole thing. I actually feel really guilty about my time with Poetry.com, and I will tell you why. We were a poor family, and yeah, it might have been because they seemed actually legitimate at the time. We were a poor family, and they kept telling me I was a winner, so one day my mom broke down and bought me a membership. It was like $200 maybe, and we were poor. And she made sure we had enough so that I could get that nice plaque behind my head because we put it on the wall behind my chair where I did my writing. And I got a membership card and everything, and I felt so guilty when I found out they were a scam. I was broken because I thought nothing I did as a poet was legitimate. Because most of my publications early on, not all, but a lot, came from Poetry.com. So I felt like I was the scum of the earth, that I basically made my mom buy this thing for me that was really important to me at the time. But here it was a scam, It was just horrible. And they kept sending me things. It was horrible. And for the longest time, I felt so bad because we didn't have the money back then. We lived in a 2-bedroom trailer owned by my grandmother, and me and my mom and my 2 older brothers were in that trailer with the 2 bedrooms. I shared a bedroom with my mother until I was 20 years old. So that should tell you how poor we were. And yeah, I felt so guilty. And that's the thing. So that's one of the reasons I'm going through this, is because I don't want you to fall for what I fell for. So yeah, judges are always anonymous. When a legitimate contest is holding and call for entries, they will always tell you who their judges are. Their judges should be published themselves, have a track record of some kind. And if they're like, judges, well, we have them and they're secret. And it's like, no, most people will tell you who the judges are. And always investigate what they've done. Okay, I can't mention the poet who this is, but we're gonna have a discussion now, Shelpers. Very famous poet, older woman, has also started for the last 20 years, has been doing a lot of judging. And I could go into judging a lot because the amount of nepotism, the amount of interesting things I've seen. But this is one of the most egregious. She actually published or voted for her own husband in the contest. And you're not supposed to, morally, you're supposed to say, I can't judge you because I know you. The minute you're familiar with someone's work, you're supposed to say, you have to remove this entry because I cannot be unbiased. Yes, that's cheating. And that's the thing. What is the likelihood she doesn't know what her fucking husband's poetry sounds like? What is the likelihood? There is none. Unless he's like a closet writer and she doesn't fucking know he writes a word, which, what is the likelihood of that? You're a poet yourself. You're telling me your spouse is gonna like write in a dungeon all day and not let you see shit? And you don't know they're writing anything? Yeah, it was totally right. That's right. And a lot of higher up poets, they judge different contests, right? So then their friends who are still poets, because you're always a poet even when you're a judge. So let's say, I'm going to say Dal, Lady Random, and me. Okay, so let's say I'm a judge, but I'm still writing poetry, and Lady Random and Dal, they both put their poetry in. Now let's say I don't know Dal. But let's say I know Lady Random. All of a sudden, Lady Random wins. And the next time Lady Random judges a contest and I submitted to the contest, I just so happen to have the best one. Oh my God, isn't that interesting? Isn't that fascinating? And I'm going to stop for a minute right here and say, these weren't scams. These were legitimate contests that were just rigged. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. There used to be a website out there called Poetry. Poetry with an F. And they used to talk about interesting things like this all the time. Yes, it is still a scam, I agree. They used to talk about stuff like that all the time. Well, because they were exposing the dirty little secrets of the publishing world in regards to poetry, they got shut down. They got harassment up the asshole. And they got shut down. I don't remember if they got shut down, to be honest, or if they shut themselves down because they were receiving like death threats and stuff. But yeah, they tried to expose it for years. And so many people said, we need a poetry. We need poetry again. Especially because they say there's not a lot of money in poetry. So poetry isn't looked at as much as like some other forms of writing. So I have to move on, but there are so many interesting tangents. Anyway, always know who your judges are. and always know what they've done. And even if you are entering a contest that's legit, it's good to kind of look up the judges, know their work, be familiar, because it might help you figure out the kind of things they're interested in, and it might help you target your submission a little bit better. But, there are a lot of different steps to get to that final judge because there are first readers, but that's a whole different story. Okay, takes new entries, but no winner is announced ever. We just had an issue with this from one of the magazines where they were accepting more entries, and yet the contest from 3 years ago was not announced. And they didn't even close down their stuff as far as to say, okay, we're backlogged, or okay, they said it was a new contest and had new entries flowing in, and still had 2 former contest periods that did not have winners announced. And of course, it just so happens that open door comes with a hefty submission fee. So they're still taking people's money, but nothing is announced. It's still happening. So make sure the contest is announced. Shady sponsors. I'm running a contest, but I so happen to be affiliated with this horrible vanity press. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Look for who runs the thing. Look for where their money is coming from, or who the editors are, all the judges, all of that. But also, I found something today that makes me sad. Okay, so there was a group of magazines that were started together by the same company. And I found out today that the company who owns them is actually a large LLC. And when people pay into their contests or pay to get feedback, they actually outsource it to another editor. So the editors at the magazines themselves don't even give you the feedback. If that weren't a little weird enough, most of the masthead on these magazines aren't paid. And yet they make good money charging people for these contests, but don't even pay their masthead. The critiques aren't even coming from the people on the masthead. So if I submit to, I'm going to drop names here, Palette Poetry is one of them. I think it's Palette. And if I were going to submit to Palette, then I wanted to know, how close was I to getting accepted, why it wasn't a good fit for their magazine. I'm sure the editor who was outsourced couldn't even fucking tell me why specifically for their magazine. Yeah, they could tell me well, your grammar fucking sucks or whatever, because they're an editor, but they can't tell me well, the tone is wrong, or we're getting oversaturated with, say, bird poems or something. They can't tell me anything concrete about why. So I used to think Palette was good. They also have YA Voyager and a few other things. They're owned by the same company, and it sounds like more and more shady shit is going on. So if you come across them, they read up as reputable. And I've sent to them before. I think it's Frontier Poetry. Yeah, actually it does suck. Outsourcing sucks. But I think they would get more money saved by outsourcing, which is why they do it. Just like why most people do it. But yeah, it's not a good situation. It's Frontier. I think it's Palette maybe is owned by the same people. And YA Voyager and a few other ones. I think are all owned by this LLC. I don't remember the name of the LLC. So protect yourself. But even if you think it's genuine, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're just going to be caught. And I've told you about the fact that I had a chapbook that was accepted but never published. And they have good press. They have people singing their praises. And yet I got fucked over anyway. So, 9. Fees disproportionate to prizes. I'm going to charge you a $20 fee. Everyone who enters, there's only going to be a $500 cash prize. We're expecting 3,000 entries. That's not proportionate. Spam emails advertising it out of nowhere. Do you want to enter our contest? You've never signed up for our newsletter. You don't know who we are, but please sign up for our contest. Not good. Spam emails usually equal scam. Offers you more ways to pay. Poetry.com was religious with this. Mugs, t-shirts, plaques, trips, trophies, ribbons, new books, everything. Stuff that I should be selling myself with my poetry on it through Etsy or whatever. They were trying to sell me. Oh, do you want like a new coffee mug for your dad with your poem on it? Well, here it is. So if they try to upsell you on all these different things, they are a scam. Books with winners that have tiny font, again, poetry, so they could cram as many in there as possible. Multiple winning entries per page because they want more people to buy it. And run by a huge company. That I added that in there because of what I saw with like palette poetry. Now, I'm not saying that every huge company, that's why I have pink flag instead of a red one. Some huge companies run legitimate contests. But there are some huge companies that got huge by running these contests for money. So be careful. Know who runs it. Know how long it's been going. Yeah, just all kinds of fun stuff. All right, so next page, literary agent red flags. Now, this is going to kind of overlap with traditional publishers. Some of these are going to kind of be similar in a way to contests. I have problems with literary agents. I've talked about it on Dan's stream. Most of the time, if you want to be a big name person in the writing industry who goes to like the big 5 publishing houses, you absolutely need a fucking agent. There is no way around it. But I still don't like literary agents for a lot of reasons. I can do a separate video on that, or you can watch the stream I did with Dan. But let's go. They ask you for payment up front. Again, with a traditional publisher, no payment up front. A literary agent will get money from you because they will take 15% of the money you make off your books. Also, if they want to take more than 15%, no. 15%, say it with me, class, is a standard in the publishing business. They will not take more from you than 15. They will not take money from you up front. One, if either of these two things are here, they are doing this to fucking scam you. Because scams mean money. They want your money. So 15% is standard. And no money up front. Their email address doesn't match. Okay, so say just out of the blue, or let's say you go searching for, but let's say not out of the blue, because out of the blue is rare. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's say you're searching for agents, and all of a sudden you see an agent, and they're like, yeah, I am, who the fuck is it? I'm from the Donald Moss agency, let's say. And it's like, their fucking thing is like a Yahoo address. No, when an agent is part of an agency, they will have an address that's like at the initials of the agency, like at DM agency or whatever the fuck it is. So if you get like something out of the blue from an agent and you don't think it's a scam, we'll talk about that in a minute, always look at the address. Is it an address that matches where they say they're coming from? That's always good to know. That's also how I spot like fake PayPal or Amazon emails as well, because they're like, oh, Amazon, and you look at it and it's like DM5X74 at like AOL.com, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're totally Amazon. That's good. So always make sure that lines up. They're connected to vanity presses. Let's say you know for sure poetry is a scam, poetry.com. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah, I work a lot with poetry.com. You're like, oh, no, you're not a real agent, okay? So, asking you to pay for their editing services. Now, agents, when they sign you on, will help you edit and develop your book before they go to presses a lot of times to see if the presses want to buy your work. Well, they will not ask you, they will not say, hey, I'm working on your book and giving you recommendations. Can you pay me for my time? They are not an independent editor. They are working with you to make your submission ready to go out. They will not ask you to pay for their services. Also, if they say to you, well, here's this one really expensive editing service you can get your stuff done from, look at that sideways. Because they are not supposed to be necessarily recommending stuff to you out of the blue. If you ask and whatever, they're supposed to be able to help you, or they can offer to give you a list of people they've worked with. Always vet that. But if they're really pushing you toward, yeah, this place that charges $2,000, they can totally get your book submission up and running, I promise. If they're trying to funnel you toward a specific editing service, or even if they're trying to funnel you toward a specific publisher. Now, there's going to be a few little notes to this. Agents are supposed to have connections with different publishers. But if an agent pressures you to go with one specific publisher and always one specific publisher, you have to step back and ask yourself why that could be. Because there shouldn't be just one good publisher for your book. There should be several they can list. So if they're trying to pressure you to go to one specific person or one specific company, always wonder why. Always wonder why. They shouldn't be funneling you in one direction. So, offers you reviews or other services for money. They are not a review thing. They will not hire your publicist. Publicists usually come with a publishing house, and that's your PR team if you get any at all. We've talked about that already. So, they will not offer you to get you reviews or other services for money. That is not their job. That is not their place. Your publishing house will have these kind of people on staff. So they're unlikely to solicit you out of nowhere. That's right. It is very rare to get a legitimate agent or publishing company or whatever in your email without you signing up for anything or doing anything. Now, there has been the very, very occasional time where an agent has seen like a short story in a magazine and has actually contacted someone and said, you know, oh my God, can you send me your stuff? But it is extremely rare. And when they contact you, they will be like, my name is blank. I saw your story in blank. And talk about your story and praise it specifically, and their email will match up, and they will ask what else you're working on. I'm almost certain they will not offer you representation directly out of just seeing one story. But it is exceedingly rare to have this happen to you. Very rare. Kind of like, and I'm going to go off on another tangent. After I moved into my apartment and my mom was still living where she had been living, one day she calls me up or messages me, I think it was on Facebook, and says to me, oh my God, Dolly. Yeah, my mom called me Dolly. She said, oh my God, Dolly, a publisher out of New York just said that they want to represent you or they want to buy your book or whatever. I am so happy for you. I gave them your number and she said she would call you. And it's incredible, and I'm overjoyed, and I love you, and I knew you could always make it, gushing mom stuff. And I wrote her back, and I told her, Mom, this is probably a scam. And she's like, no, it wasn't. The woman sounded so happy. And I'm like, Mom, what was the name of the publishing house? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, Mom, what was the name of the woman? I don't know. I said, Mom, the fact that you don't have those details right there, but you clearly remember New York, says something happened. Because most of the big publishing houses are in New York. In America, anyway. So they probably hammered home to her that New York was part of this whole thing. So it's very easy, even on the phone, to get caught up in scams. So I told my mom, I bet you anything, they're not even going to call me. Because I never sent to anything. That's another thing. Why would they be calling up my mother? I would never give out my mother's phone number. I would always give out mine. You know, it's not like they have like an emergency contact thing like the doctors do. It's not something that happens. When I submit my work, if they ask for a phone number, I always say my number, not my family's numbers. So how would they have gotten my mom's number from me legitimately? And I never sent anything into a book contest in New York. They don't just randomly pick a winner from every poet in existence, like spin a damn wheel and say, oh, it's Toluca's turn. That's not what happens. So I didn't send anything in. That's another thing. If you don't send anything in and you hear stuff, that's mighty fishy. So unrealistic promises or super vague. So super vague about what they're offering, what they like about your work. Oh, it's good. It's whatever. Somebody representing you or taking you on for being a writer for their publishing company should always have specific points they like about your stuff or don't. Unrealistic promises, promising you the moon. We talked about that during my contract. If they promise you a certain number of copies, awards, stuff like that, it's a lie. Nobody can guarantee your success because we don't know what the market's going to do. We don't know what's going to happen. Everything is a crapshoot. Like I said, during the merger or the meeting to stop Penguin Random from acquiring yet another Big Five publishing house, one of the things they basically admitted to is we throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. Do these sound like the people that can guarantee me $1 million in royalties? No, they don't even fucking know what they're doing, and they admitted it on the stand. They are not gonna be able to fucking get me on Jerry Springer or whatever the fuck it is. So, okay, as an agency, signing many people in a short time is a newbie. A lot of new agents are legitimate, but they aren't proven. They used to work as an editor or something and switch over. It happens a lot. I'm not saying this is exactly a red flag, maybe more like a pink flag, but they might not have as much time for you, and as a newbie, they really need to focus on a few people at a time. So if they're signing up dozens of people at a crack, something's going to fall apart here. So an agent wants poets is number 8. I've told you all how much I'm going to be making on my book. On a good year, whatever that is, it's like $120. There's no way an agent is going to look at you unless you're an Instagram poet. They might have an agent in certain cases, but for the most part, there is no money in poetry, so there are no agents for poetry, because agents only go where the money is. So email is riddled with errors. Generally, an agent or a publisher can form a sentence, can make it flow well enough. I'm not saying a misplaced comma or anything like that, but very broken English to the point where you don't know what they're saying at all. And we're talking about people who profess to be in American literature. They would know how to put a sentence together. They just would. I'm not talking about somebody from a different country where you're in a different country and they're trying to represent you in English. That's a whole other thing. I'm talking about American to American publishing. No shame to anybody who's ESL, which is English as a second language. But if they're working in literature in English, they would know how to put a sentence together. So, reports on Yelp, the Better Business Bureau, or watchdog sites. I didn't think about this with the place that took my work for 3 years. But I went on Yelp and the Better Business Bureau after I found out they were actually not as good as they said they were. And I found reviews of not only poets, but also people who bought books from them and never received the books and got the runaround. And it took forever for them to get their money back. And that is a red flag right there. If you have a lot of people saying, not only did they not publish me, but I went to buy my friend's book and it took them 6 months to get back to me, that's a problem. There's a way I think you can scam with the Better Business Bureau. And I think that's if the company decides to respond, I think you can get a lot of that washed away. But it is a good place to start. And Yelp is a good place to start. I didn't know any of that. Right, there's always ways to scam. But I didn't know that there were reports of them on the Better Business Bureau. I didn't think to check, honestly. Because I'm not seeing them as a business. I'm looking at them for press coverage or arts events or happy authors, or I'm doing Google searches with the word legit, scam in the name of the press. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm even doing it on fucking Twitter. And there was only one thread on Twitter I didn't find till way later that didn't even use certain keywords I was using for the press. And then I found out way too late. And it was only one thread out of so many happy authors that maybe I would have been starry-eyed and just ignored it. Excuse me, I'm getting a little dry. But that is a good place to look, and I wouldn't have thought of that until my own issues. So, high turnovers. So this is another thing. There was I think a company or an agency called New Leaf that all of a sudden let certain agents go, and their clients just fell out from under, and it's a whole big brouhaha that's actually ongoing right now in the publishing industry. So if you have high turnover, mass resignations at an agency, sometimes even at a publisher, yeah, it's not good. It tells you there's problems on the boat. There's something happening somewhere. Okay, so the last thing is they don't want you to talk to their writers. So if you actually say to them, can I talk to some people who are your clients? And if they say no, why do you have to do that or whatever? That is a red flag. Because if they had happy clients, they would actually tell you, yeah, go ahead or whatever. They wouldn't want to hide it from you. And I mean, you wouldn't want to be nose into everybody's business, but they should actually have people who are happy with them. You know what I'm saying? If they don't, run. Okay, so this is my last page because there are different ways to find legitimate stuff, and I put a star next to legitimate because nothing is for sure. Even with all these websites that really do try their best, always do your research. Always know, like I said, what the red flags are. Always know when to walk away. Always read the damn guidelines so you know they're not taking your rights. So, how to find legitimate contests. Some of these will overlap for publishers. P&W stands for Poets and Writers. They have a database for magazines, awards, grants, all kinds of stuff. They do a pretty good job being transparent, but there's a lot of entries on there. It's free to use, but like I said, always look. Always look. Funds for Writers has a newsletter that gives you different stuff. Sometimes they do freelance markets as well. They will give you contests and stuff. Practicing Writer, every Monday she has new markets. That's Erica Dreyfus. And she will put up jobs as well. If somebody's looking for an associate editor, something like that. So that's a good one. Published to Death does more than just contests. Every month they have contests with no fees that pay. Every month they have magazines with no pay or no fee that pay. And She does posts, Erica Verillo. She does posts on agents, and she vets the agents. So it's good to have Published to Death, also called Publishing and Other Forms of Insanity. And it's good to have that one, number 4. 5 is the Alliance of Independent Authors. I don't use them much, but they used to put on a conference that I used to listen to all the time on different aspects of self-publishing, even as a poet, which I thought it was interesting. But they have author award contests rated and reviewed. Authors publish, I gotta tell you, they put out huge lists. Every year they do one for like fee-free publishers of poetry and whatnot. And their poetry one almost has 100, I think, listed. And I gotta tell you, they do other, like, periodically update different entries. They're always telling you who's open for what. Anytime they see something that looks a little sketchy, they're like, this used to be like more self-pubbed stuff, or their website's hard to navigate, or whatever. They tell you the pros and cons. I really appreciate Authors Publish. It's a free resource. Highly recommend a lot of these things on the list. But I gotta tell you, I think Authors Publish might be where I found my publisher. So a lot of my rejections came from the ones on there too, because I told myself I wasn't going to pay to be rejected. And then there's Winning Writers, which has fee-free contests. They also talk about like writing contest scams, stuff like that. They might have stuff I missed. And on the bottom is a watchdog site called Writer Beware. They talk about stuff that happens in the publishing industry regarding like new agent scams and stuff like that. So they're a really good site to have if you're a writer. They're an offshoot of the Science Fiction Writers of America. So it's all legit all the way down. Victoria Strauss does amazing things. They don't put every complaint they receive unless they have more than one on the same company. So yeah, but it's a really good place. And this is just a solid foundation of where to find some stuff. If you have any questions anywhere about anything, you can email me at, I think it's tolucaturtle@outlook.com. I'm on Discord. I'm on Twitter. You can just ask me anything you want. One day I might do a deeper video, but not a stream, about money and publishing and why, like, your favorite author of this indie series might still be slinging burgers at Burger King or whatever. Because like I said, it doesn't pay the bills for the majority of us. It's kind of like being a VTuber and everybody thinking you're going to be the next Iron Mouse. And it's like, you can always hope so, but the likelihood is you're going to be the next me. Which I make nothing. So you never know. But yeah, that is where I'm ending today's presentation. And yeah, hey, it's good to dream. Always dream. Always keep reaching. But always know that sometimes dreams stay dreams. And like I said, when I talk money on this, I'm not trying to get everybody upset. I'm trying to get them realistic. You know, and that's the thing. When I want to talk about like how many copies per trade book sold, I'm trying to get people, I think it was 50, the number. But I want people to be realistic, because people think as a writer or as a VTuber or whatever we may call this money, and you can, but it doesn't mean you do. And sometimes we do things for the love of it, or to supplement our income, or to go as far as we can. I think if we truly love something, no matter how much it pays us, if we can, we should go as far as we can. We should run as far and as hard as we can without ruining ourselves or burning out. Balance is very, very important. That's why I don't agree with the whole write every day thing. I fucking don't do that. And everybody's limits are, you know, diverse. But I think we should always move toward that horizon, even if we know we're not going to reach the end. because you're going to get old anyway. If you're lucky, we're all going to get old. We're all going to die at some point, even if it's very far in the future. So would you rather sit around pining for what could have been, or would you rather collapse on your way to the horizon? Because the sunset might be beautiful. So always keep what you're passionate about, tempered with reality. And I will see all of you lovelies next week with more gaming, because I game a lot. You don't know how much it takes to put this all together. So quite a bit. But by the end of the month, I hope to have another paranormal stream for you. So, all right, everybody. Yep, and thank you all for coming. I appreciate you, and you know where to find me. Put it in the YouTube comments, put it on Twitter, Discord, all that. And I will see you next week. Be safe. Bye.